For Eric J on Sports, I'm Eric J, and this is what I think. I've always been a fan of classic television, and I guess when I was younger it wasn't classic television, it was just television. But I've always been a fan of shows like The A-Team, and on a particular episode of The A-Team, a group of crime bosses, upset that the A-Team had constantly foiled their plans, hire a mercenary to take out the A-Team for them. And this mercenary grabs some of the best other mercenaries that he can find and puts them together, and without much time to train and without really knowing one another and without much time to put together a real plan, they go out after the A-Team. And they have some initial success, but in the end the A-Team wins. And just as the A-Team is foiling their plan once more, the leader of the A-Team, Hannibal Smith, looks at the leader of the mercenaries and says, "The next time you want to take somebody out, pal, don't get yourself a squad, get yourself a team." A reference to the fact that the show is called The A-Team and that these guys have been together for a dozen years or more, according to the show. And that brings me to an interesting thought. I'm watching the Lakers play this year, and the Lakers 2 seasons ago won the NBA championship. And the Lakers last season suffered through some injuries and some difficult situations and were eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. Or I guess you could call it the first round because they had to win the play-in game and the whole thing. And, I think that's kind of a weird deal to when you earn the 8th spot. You still have to convince people that you deserve to be in the 8th spot, and you could end up out of the playoffs altogether. But that's another story for another day. But they got into the playoffs, they faced the Phoenix Suns, who are one of the best teams in the NBA right now and were last season because they went all the way to the NBA Finals before losing, and they were eliminated. And so this year, the Lakers turned over their entire roster. The only players who returned from last season's team were LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Taylor Horton Tucker. Everybody else who was on the team last year was sent away and replaced with an entirely new roster. Now, I've talked before about how it doesn't make sense to tear up a team because I think back to the 2010 Lakers and they won the NBA championship. And then in 2011, they had to deal with some injuries and some personal issues, and they were defeated by the Dallas Mavericks in the first round of the playoffs, which I didn't think was that big a deal, because the Dallas Mavericks ultimately won the NBA championship that year. So that means that nobody could defeat the Dallas Mavericks in 2011. But what the Lakers did after losing to the Dallas Mavericks was they broke up their entire team and they brought in an entire roster of different people. They maintained about 2 or 3 guys, including Kobe Bryant, and they brought in an entire roster of new people. And then that team suffered through not making the playoffs until LeBron James showed up. And LeBron James showed up and they won the NBA championship in his first season there. And then last season, they were eliminated in the first round. And just like in 2011, the Lakers tore up the entire team, kept a couple of key guys, and brought in an entirely new roster. And just like in 2012, when the Lakers did it, the new Lakers are struggling. They have a .500 record right now, which is, I guess, fine in a parity-driven league like the NBA. But in truth, this was supposed to be the team that brought the Lakers back to prominence. They went out and grabbed a lot of all-stars. If you look at their roster right now, they have LeBron, Anthony Davis, Dwight Howard, DeAndre Jordan, Rajon Rondo, Carmelo Anthony, and Russell Westbrook. 7 guys who've been to at least one All-Star game. And then they brought in a bunch of guys like Wayne Ellington and Kent Bazemore and brought back Avery Bradley and Malik Monk and a couple of young guys, Austin Reeves, and their entire roster is different from the roster last year. And of course, people are going to say, well, you can't really look at their new roster and say that the team is worse or better because LeBron James has missed a ton of games. And he has. But even if he hadn't, you're talking about a guy in his 18th season. You're talking about a guy who, if you include his 9 or 10 consecutive trips to the NBA Finals when he was with the Miami Heat and the Cleveland Cavaliers, you're talking about a guy who's played a ton of extra basketball. If you just add the times he went to the NBA Finals, that's at least 20 extra games, and he's been to the finals 10 times. That's 200 extra games, which equates to something like 3 extra seasons. So yes, he's in his 18th basketball season, but if you count playoffs, he's in like season 21 or 22. So yes, he's old, and his body is old, and his mind is old, and he may not be the LeBron James that he was 10 years ago. And that's going to happen to people. But this team is different. They brought in a bunch of alleged shooters, but they still have one of the worst three-point percentages in the league. But they got rid of their role players, the guys that played defense, the guys that learned what to do and when to do it and how to do it around LeBron and Anthony Davis. They brought in a bunch of guys. They did a thing that I've heard in sports media referred to as the name game. They went out and grabbed name players. Rajon Rondo, Russell Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony, Dwight Howard, DeAndre Jordan, Avery Bradley, Kent Bazemore, who was a hot property a couple of years ago. They went out and grabbed a bunch of names, but they didn't grab players who could help them win. Yeah, these players could probably help them win. Let me retract that statement. They didn't assemble a team. They went out and got a squad. They got enough players to be able to play games each time a game is scheduled. But they don't have a team. And the reason they don't have a team, or the way you know that they don't have a team, is that if you look at the Lakers' games so far, the games they've won and the games they've lost, if you look at the box score, you will not see the same starting lineup 2 games in a row. And some of you purists will say, oh, well, that's because they're running out players based on who the opponent is. And that may be true. I may not be smart enough or savvy enough to understand analytics-based basketball. But I remember watching the Lakers in the 80s. And I knew that unless someone was injured, I would always see Kareem, A.C. Green, James Worthy, Byron Scott, and Magic Johnson in the starting 5. And the next 3 players would be Michael Cooper, Kurt Rambis, and Michael Thompson. And then whoever the other guard was, whether it was Sedale Threatt or Terry Teagle or Wes Matthews or whoever the other guard was, that person would get some playing time. But it would always be Kareem, Green, Worthy, Scott, Magic, and then Cooper, Rambis, and Michael Thompson. And the reason for that is because Pat Riley believed in consistency. If you practice every day with Kareem, Green, Worthy, Scott, and Magic, and then you practice with the other squad, and that other squad is centered around Cooper, Rambis, and Michael Thompson, then guys know who they're playing with. They know what the guy they're playing with can do. They know what the guy who they're playing with can't do. They know where that person is going to be in a particular instance, in a particular situation, based on a particular play, and they know what their role is in that situation. They come to know the other players as well as they know themselves. They come to know who's going to do what, when, and how in every situation. And it gets to the point where you don't have to think anymore. You just have to go out and play. Phil Jackson was very good at this when he was a coach. He felt like he taught his players everything they need to know in practice, so when they went out in games, they could just perform. Phil Jackson went to 6 finals in 8 years with the Chicago Bulls. He took the Lakers to 3 finals in 3 seasons before the team was broken up. Pat Riley took the Lakers to 7 finals with Kareem and Magic. So consistency matters. Even if you look at the Miami Heat with LeBron, D-Wade, and Chris Bosh, and Haslam, and Joel Anthony, and the team that they assembled. They ran out the same 5 guys every game, and they were successful. But now you have this Lakers team. One day, DeAndre Jordan is starting at center, and Dwight Howard is on the bench. Next game, Dwight Howard is starting at center, and DeAndre Jordan is on the bench. Next game, Anthony Davis is starting at center, and Dwight Howard is on the bench, and DeAndre Jordan doesn't play. One game, Taylor Horton Tucker is starting at guard. The next game, Avery Bradley is starting at guard and Taylor Horton-Tucker doesn't play. Then the next game, Horton-Tucker starts at small forward and Avery Bradley starts at guard and Bazemore's on the bench. And then the next game, Bazemore's starting and Horton-Tucker's on the bench and Avery Bradley doesn't play. And then after that, Malik Monk starts at guard, and then Rajon Rondo plays, and in some games he doesn't, and then Austin Reeves plays, and in some days he only gets in 3 minutes and doesn't get any shots. And you're looking at this, and you're going, it seems like this is playground basketball. You just grab 5 guys and you go out there and you see what happens. There's no consistency. There's no cohesion. There's not a team. It's just a squad. And Frank Vogel, the coach, goes out there and says, who do I want to play today? It's hard for a team to get consistent and for a team to be successful when 1 minute to the next, you don't know what you're doing. The only thing that you can say that happens consistently every game is that you'll have Anthony Davis and Russell Westbrook because LeBron has been injured back and forth and in and out of the lineup. And of course, again, the purists will say, well, that's why the starting lineup keeps changing. Well, no. The only thing that needs to change in the starting lineup from game to game is whether or not LeBron is playing. If he plays, he starts. If he does not play, someone else starts in his place. Everybody else should be the same. Because that way, Davis will know what Westbrook is doing, and Westbrook will know what Dwight Howard or DeAndre Jordan is doing, and Horton-Tucker or Bradley or whoever the other guard is will know what they're supposed to do in certain situations. It'll come to be like their language. They'll be doing it without thinking, and it'll run so smoothly you won't even see it coming. It'll be a situation where we know what they're going to do, but how do we stop it? As it is now, you've got a bunch of guys. Not very many of them are great free throw shooters. Not very many of them are great three-point shooters. And you've got a bunch of guys who don't know what they're supposed to do, and they're out there trying to do it. They're out there figuring, we are all-stars. We've got a bunch of all-stars, so that means we're better than everybody else, and we can just play and score 160 points like they do in the All-Star game every year. And that's not going to happen when you've got teams that are assembled, that practice together and play together and learn each other and are getting better while your team is treading water, win one, lose one, because you don't know what you're doing from game to game. It's sad. Because this team is supposed to win championships. This is the Lakers. Half of the championships that have ever been won in the NBA have been won by either the Celtics or the Lakers. So the Lakers aren't playing just to get in the playoffs. This is a team that believes they should be in the finals. No team has won more championships than the Celtics and Lakers. They both have 17. So this is a situation where this team has higher aspirations than, say, the Clippers or the Phoenix Suns or the Milwaukee Bucks, who actually won a championship, or the Brooklyn Nets, who are trying to win one, or any of these other organizations who either have won one or have never won one. This team has higher aspirations, and which is why they brought in LeBron James, which is why they brought in Anthony Davis, and which is why they chose to go with Russell Westbrook and to trade a good portion of their squad as opposed to signing Buddy Hield. They did this because they expected to win a championship, and they still might. But right now, it doesn't look that way. It doesn't look like a team. This doesn't look like a team that can win a championship. It doesn't look like a team at all. It looks like a squad. And to borrow a line from the great Hannibal Smith, the next time you want to win, don't get yourself a squad. Get yourself a team. And Lakers, it doesn't seem like you've gotten yourself a team. At least not yet. Remember to like and share this video and subscribe to this channel. And follow me on Facebook at Eric J on Sports 1 and on Instagram and Twitter at Eric J on Sports. And for Eric J on Sports, I'm Eric J, and this is what I think.